arguably brought the most mainstream attention King Von has ever received at the time, furthermore skyrocketing his music career and street reputation. King Von was still going back to O Block.
All right, strap in, everybody. Today we are taking a deep dive into a story that's got everyone talking. The arrest of Chicago rapper Lil Durk.
Yeah, it's been all over the news.
Absolutely. And we asked you guys to send us a bunch of articles about this whole thing. And wow, there are a lot of moving parts.
There are. And it really gets you thinking about the intersection of music and feuds and the law, how they all kind of get tangled up.
Yeah, before we get too deep into it, for anyone who might not be familiar, Lil Durk, big name in Chicago rap.
Definitely.
This isn't just some small-time situation. This is a complex story.
It really is. And it all kind of begins back in 2020 with the death of King Von.
Right, King Von.
Yeah.
Another Chicago rapper, up-and-comer, was close with Lil Durk.
Right. Tight with Lil Durk. And he was shot and killed in Atlanta after some kind of confrontation with Lil Tim.
Lil Tim, who was part of rapper Quando Rondo's crew.
Exactly.
So fast forward to August of 2022. Another shooting.
Yeah, this time in L.A.
And the target this time was Quando Rondo. So are we thinking this is retaliation for King Von's death?
That seems to be the prevailing theory.
An eye for an eye kind of thing.
Possibly, but it's all speculation at this point. Now, Rondo survived the shooting, but his cousin, Savia Robinson, she was killed.
And this is where Lil Durk comes into the picture, right?
Right, because he was recently arrested in Florida. And get this, on charges of murder for hire.
Whoa. Wait, hold on. Murder for hire?
Yep. Connected to that 2022 shooting in L.A.
Wow. Okay, so are they saying he put a hit out on Quando Rondo?
Well, not exactly. Here's where it gets a little complicated.
Okay.
So 5 members of his hip-hop group, only the family, usually called OTF,
Okay.
they were indicted on federal charges related to the shooting in L.A.
Okay, 5 members. So was this like a gang thing or?
Well, the indictment, and just to clarify, an indictment means a formal accusation. It's not a conviction.
Gotcha.
It's just the first step in a legal process.
Mm-hmm.
So this indictment names Kevon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Brian Lindsay, and Asa Houston.
Okay, so what are they being charged with?
Conspiracy to commit murder for hire, committing murder for hire resulting in death, and then a bunch of different firearms offenses.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
So walk me through this. What's the prosecution's story here? What actually led up to this shooting?
Right, so they're claiming that these OTF members used a credit card that was connected to OTF to buy plane tickets to L.A.
Okay.
They flew to L.A., they tracked down Rondo and his cousin, and then the shooting happened.
At a gas station. Right, I remember reading that.
Yep, gas station. And after the shooting, they used that same credit card to buy flights back to Chicago.
So they flew all the way out to L.A., allegedly did this, and flew right back.
According to the prosecution, that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this L.A. indictment against the 5 OTF members.
Right.
But you said Lil Durk isn't named in that. So where does he actually fit into all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
See, he was charged separately in Florida. And those charges, murder for hire, related to that same shooting.
Oh, so they're going after him in Florida even though he wasn't in the L.A. indictment.
That's right. It's an interesting legal strategy. You know, by charging him separately, they might be trying to avoid directly linking him to what the other OTF members did.
Ah, okay. I'm starting to see the picture here. So they're not necessarily saying he was there. They're not saying that he pulled the trigger. They're saying he was the one who maybe, like, orchestrated it.
Yeah, they're going after him for allegedly masterminding the whole thing. Maybe using evidence like financial records, communications, maybe even witness statements to try to build that case against him specifically.
So they're building this case that he was the one behind it all. The puppet master, so to speak.
That's the impression I get, yeah.
Now, Lil Durk, of course, he says he's innocent, right?
He does.
But this whole thing, it's really putting a spotlight on his past.
Right, because this isn't his first run-in with the law. Back in 2019, he was hit with 5 felony charges connected to another shooting, this time in Chicago.
Yeah, so he's been down this road before, but this murder for hire charge, that's a different level.
It's a whole other ballgame. And we're not just talking about legal trouble here. This could have huge implications for his entire career.
For sure. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to dig deeper into the evidence and explore potential defenses. Stay tuned. Welcome back. All right, so last time we were talking about these pretty serious accusations against Lil Durk, but the details were still a bit unclear.
Yeah.
So let's zoom in. What exactly is the prosecution's case hinging on? Like, what evidence are they using to try to link him to this murder-for-hire plot?
Well, we have to remember that the indictment itself doesn't name Lil Durk, but it does lay out a pretty incriminating picture of what his associates allegedly did.
Right. We're talking about those 5 OTF members who supposedly went to L.A. and carried out the shooting.
Exactly. And the prosecution is focusing on some specific pieces of evidence to try to connect Lil Durk to those actions. For one, there's that credit card that was allegedly used to buy plane tickets to and from L.A.
Okay, so they're saying it was like a company card or something connected to OTF.
That's what they're claiming.
Yeah.
Which definitely implies some level of group involvement, right? The argument is likely going to be that Lil Durk, as the leader of OTF, knew about it or even authorized the use of that card for this.
So even if he didn't personally book the flights, they're trying to establish this financial link.
Exactly, showing that OTF funds were used to facilitate this alleged hit.
Okay, so it's circumstantial. It doesn't directly prove he ordered a hit, but it creates a suggestion.
Right, it raises questions. And then there's that alleged meeting after the shooting where the group supposedly discussed payment.
Right. The indictment mentioned that. A meeting at a restaurant. I was kind of confused why they put that in there, but now it makes sense.
Yeah, that detail is really important because it points to, like, a prearranged agreement.
Right.
A plan. Before the shooting even happened, think about it.
Yeah.
You and I plan a bank robbery, and then we meet up to split the loot.
Right.
That suggests a conspiracy.
Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
so the prosecution is trying to use that meeting as evidence that this wasn't just random, it was planned, that there were financial motives.
Exactly. And they're going to be looking for any communication logs, witness statements, transactions, anything that supports that this payment discussion actually took place.
Okay, so they're connecting these dots, trying to show that Lil Durk was involved, maybe even the one who came up with the plan. But if it's all circumstantial, is there any hard proof, like a smoking gun?
Well, that's the tough part for the prosecution. They have to build a really solid case.
Right.
Convincing enough to get a jury to believe that his involvement goes beyond just being associated with OTF.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle.
They have to prove that he was directly involved in planning or carrying out the hit.
Okay, so what about Lil Durk and his team? What are they going to do to defend against these allegations?
His lawyers are going to focus on a few key things. First, they'll probably try to find holes in the prosecution's case, attack the evidence.
Okay, so create doubt.
Exactly. Classic defense strategy. They might question those credit card records, cast doubt on witness statements, maybe downplay the significance of other evidence. They'll be looking for any inconsistency, any weakness to exploit.
And they'll probably try to separate Lil Durk from the actions of those other OTF members. Right?
For sure. They're going to argue that just because he leads OTF doesn't mean he's criminally responsible for everything they do.
Right. Just because you're associated with a group doesn't mean you're part of every decision.
Exactly. They'll try to portray him as a successful musician, a businessman, not some criminal mastermind.
So it's all about shaping the narrative, painting a picture of Lil Durk that's more favorable.
Absolutely. They want the jury to see him as a regular guy, relatable, not the cold-blooded guy the prosecution wants to portray.
It's all a game, isn't it?
It is.
It feels like this case could go either way. Prosecution has to prove his involvement beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay.
And the defense just needs to create enough doubt for an acquittal. It's
Yeah.
high stakes for sure.
Oh, absolutely. In this case, it's playing out in the courtroom, sure, but it's also playing out in the court of public opinion.
Right, and public opinion is powerful.
Right.
It doesn't always care about legal technicalities. So how do you think this will affect Lil Durk? Win or lose, what about his image, his brand?
It's hard to say for certain, but this has got to be a PR nightmare. Even if he's found not guilty, just the allegations alone, they could stick. It's a reminder that perception can be so powerful.
Yeah. So what happens next? What should we be looking out for as this moves forward?
Well, the trial itself is probably a ways off. Both sides will be building their cases, doing their prep, maybe even looking at plea deals.
Wait, plea deals, you mean like he might not even go to trial?
It's possible. The prosecution, the defense, they might decide a plea deal makes more sense. He admits to a lesser charge, gets a lighter sentence, avoids a trial altogether.
So we should be watching for plea negotiations, pre-trial motions, and of course a trial date if it gets that far.
Yeah. And as we get closer, things will get even more interesting. We'll be looking for clues about the prosecution's strategy, their evidence, and how the defense will counter that.
It's like a game of chess with these huge consequences for Lil Durk and for how we see the relationship between artists and the people they surround themselves with.
It really makes you think, where do we draw the line between individual responsibility and collective accountability? If you're associated with a group, does that automatically mean you're responsible for everything they do?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. And in this case, we're not just talking about the law, we're talking about public perception, how this affects his image, his brand, his fans, his collaborations.
It's a whole web of issues, and this case is going to have ripple effects. It reminds us that what we do, even accusations, can have really big consequences.
Definitely a lot to unpack there. So to wrap up part 2, we talked about the prosecution's case, possible defenses, and the bigger picture.
We looked at the legal side, the public opinion side, and the ethical questions that come with all of this, and we've only scratched the surface.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll zoom out even further and talk about the cultural side of this story. Hip-hop and violence. Social media, the responsibility artists have in shaping these narratives. Don't miss it. Okay, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive into the Lil Durk case. And now I think it's time to kind of shift gears a little bit. You know, we talked about all the legal stuff, the evidence, the strategies, all that. But this whole thing, this goes way beyond just the courtroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's this whole cultural conversation happening here.
Right, you can't ignore that, especially when we're talking about hip-hop. This genre, it's always had this complicated relationship with violence, with feuds, with street life.
Right. It's almost like those things have become part of the image of hip-hop. You know,
Yeah.
like you hear hip-hop and automatically certain stereotypes pop into your head.
It's true. There's this kind of, I don't know, a double-edged sword thing going on, I guess. On the one hand, hip-hop has been this incredible voice for people who don't always get hurt.
Right.
You know, it's about struggle, about resilience, about social commentary. But then on the other hand, you can't deny that violence has been this recurring theme, both in the music and in the lives of some artists. In this case, it really makes us look at that.
So how do we make sense of that?
Yeah.
Acknowledge the violence, but not like make these huge generalizations about a whole genre of music.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? It's a tough one.
It is.
And honestly, it's something that hip-hop artists, the whole community, they've been talking about this for years.
Right.
This case just brings it all to the surface.
So how do you see this case reflecting on that connection between hip-hop and violence that everyone talks about?
Well, it's easy to look at this and just say, oh, see, hip-hop is all about guns and gangs and violence.
Right. Like it just confirms what some people already think.
But we have to resist that. You know, this one case can't be used to define an entire genre of music.
Like judging a book by its cover.
Exactly. Hip-hop is so diverse. So many different voices, styles, messages. It's not all the same.
Yeah. And there are artists out there who are using their music to talk about these issues,
Yeah,
to try to change things.
absolutely. And that's what people forget sometimes. There are artists who are promoting peace, speaking out against violence, trying to inspire change. It's not all about glorifying the street life.
Right. So it's not just about like condemning the violence. It's about putting out a different message, showing people there's another way.
Yeah, exactly. It's about showing the positive side of hip-hop, you know, the power it has to, I don't know, to start conversations.
Bring people together.
Yeah, to build bridges instead of burning them down.
In this case, also shows how dangerous these online feuds can be, like how quickly things can get out of control. Social media is like this whole other battleground now.
It really is.
And these diss tracks and threats, they can lead to real-life violence.
It's scary how words on a screen can have such a big impact, sometimes even deadly consequences.
It makes you realize how powerful words are,
Mm-hmm.
and that we all have to be careful how we use them, online and offline.
For sure. We need to learn how to disagree without resorting to violence. There's a difference between creative expression and actually encouraging people to hurt each other.
Absolutely. So with all that in mind, what are some things we can take away from this whole situation? What have we learned?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we have to be careful about how we talk about hip-hop and violence. We can't just simplify it. We have to acknowledge all the different voices within the genre, all the different perspectives.
It's about seeing the whole picture,
Right.
not just focusing on the negative.
Exactly. We have to hold individuals responsible without blaming an entire community.
Right.
And it's so important to remember that social media, it's a powerful tool. And with that power comes responsibility. We have to think about the impact our words can have.
And we have to find better ways to resolve conflict
Yes.
without resorting to violence.
We need more dialogue, more empathy, more understanding.
Well said.
This case, it's a really sad reminder of the consequences of violence and how much we need compassion and understanding in the world.
Yeah, powerful stuff. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, do you have any final thoughts, anything you want to leave our listeners with?
This case, it's about hip-hop, but it also reflects these bigger problems in our society.
Mm.
You know, it makes us look at our own biases, to think critically, to imagine a world where violence isn't the answer. It's a challenge for all of us to be better, to work for peace, to appreciate art in all its forms.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. It's been an incredible conversation.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring these issues, keep questioning, keep the conversation going. This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time.